So welcome everybody. This is the first in our series of webinar conversations that we're doing and exploring this important topic, which is about decolonizing evaluation and trying to think about how evaluation can be made fit for purpose for the poly crisis that we are facing. So I want to first of all just introduce the International Evaluation Academy. And we were established in February actually last year. And our mission, or as we prefer to call it, living purpose, is to contribute to the transformation, growth, professionalization, and use of scientific evaluation practices to address the challenges that we face. And we want to contribute to building the resilience and sustainability of this world despite the poly crisis that we face. And the unique role and contribution comes from us framing evaluation as an evolving contemporary science and embracing decolonized indigenous knowledge that is necessary for a resilient and sustainable world. And this is part of that exploration. We don't claim in this webinar today to know all the answers. We are starting an exploration that we hope to join with you, and we all need to learn in that process, and notably white male people like me. So this is part of our journey. And the Academy proposes to do this through looking at how we can develop and implement effective transformative action, transformation, professionalization, and influence of evaluation. And we do this through our board, through what we're loosely calling members, with collaborative working areas, exploring crucial topics through which the mission can be accomplished. And we will, one of the things we'll do at the end of the session is ask which of you would like to explore the National Evaluation System journey with us. So I want to just give an opportunity, if somebody from Devel, Sarah, if you'd like to just say something about Devel, because Devel has been our partner in this journey, and unfortunately, although we have failed actually to get the translation, the interpretation to work, Devel has actually paid for this, and we are very grateful, and we really hope that in the future this will not happen, and we will have an opportunity to have these webinars in multiple languages. I don't know, Sarah, if you're online or somebody that would like to just voice this. Otherwise, I'll just quickly run through it.
No, thank you very much, Ian, for giving us this opportunity. Indeed, we are very honored to have the chance to work together with the International Evaluation Academy on a topic which is of huge importance to DEVAL, which is the German Institute of Development Evaluation. And although we direct our evaluations predominantly towards the German government, of course, we work all over the world. And this is a topic of huge importance to us, which we discuss a lot in Germany. And what we seek today is what Ian already mentioned. We would have loved to bridge this gap between English-speaking evaluation community and the Spanish-speaking community. Well, without further ado, thank you for this chance, and welcome everybody today to this important session.
Thank you, Sara. And bueno, para los hispanohablantes, esta es la edición del Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation, donde sacamos mucha información, mucho conocimiento para este tema. So this is the special edition that we're drawing from, and we hope to have draw some of the great wisdom which is in here and start to apply this more to national evaluation systems. And we're hoping with this webinar series to not just be in headspace, I'll talk a little bit more about this before, but for us to address the crises that we face, we have to move to different ways of knowing and being. And we're hoping to in this webinar to have an opportunity to really discuss and bring our hearts into the space of the challenges that we're facing and how we address it. So this is our first webinar. And then on the 15th of November, there'll be a conversation between Nikki Bowman, who was one of the editors of the special edition, and myself on decolonization and indigeneity. Unfortunately, this is part of the European Evaluation Society event, so it's a paid-for event. And similarly, on the 16th of November, I just want to signal that Michael Quinn-Patton and Veronica Felsis, the Vice President of the Academy, will be training on principles for evaluation system transformation. So this is the beginning of a journey, and we hope that many of you will choose to go through this journey with us. And just to give you a bit of a frame of as to how we're going to deal with this hour and a half together. So I've just been doing this introduction. I'm going to do a little bit of a framing, and then Candace will talk about an emerging framework that we've developed actually in writing a paper that we've drawn from for this session. And then we'll have some breakout groups in random threes to just say, what does this mean for us? And we'll have a few minutes for feedback. Obviously, with the sort of numbers we've got, we're not going to be able to get each group to feedback, but we'll get some points. And then Toko Malaiwa from South Africa will talk about some of the concepts we've used, using the South Africa case as an example. Edewe Agbojan from Benin will talk about some other concepts we've used, drawing on the Benin case, and Candace will then summarize the findings. And then we're going to have a panel with a chance for one of the key authors that we've used, Beverly Parsons, who's on the call, to just respond to some questions from Candace and potentially from others on, as to what's emerged on this topic, her reactions to what we've seen. We're hoping that Hur Hasnain, our treasurer, who may join, but he may well only listen in because he's just traveled to Pakistan. And then we'll have a chance again to have some deeper discussions in groups. And as Janet said, that group in particular, the main group we're suggesting for people who are much more comfortable speaking in Spanish, don't go into the groups. You'll stay in the main session and you can discuss, and the main session will be discussed in Spanish. Then we'll have a bit of a chance for feedback and some closing. So that's how we hope to go through. And in terms of the people, just a quick introduction from me. So myself, I'm president of the International Evaluation Academy. I worked on the National Evaluation System in South Africa, and I'm now working as a monitoring and evaluation advisor on just transition in the South African presidency. We have Candace, who's a board member of the Academy, the director of Clear Anglophone Africa. We have Edewe Dimitri Agbojan, who's the director of Clear Francophone Africa. We have Thokozile Molaiwa, who's the head of evaluation of South Africa's National Evaluation System. We have Beverly, who's another Academy board member and the executive director of Insights. And we have Hur Hasnain, who's the treasurer of the Academy, who he says he's unlikely to be able to speak, but he may join us. And then the very important person of Viviana Lascano, who's the coordinator, who's playing a very important role as the Academy develops. So that's the group. And I'm just going to do a little framing for this. And firstly, we're now in an unprecedented period of climate change. It's no longer the future, it's happening. And we're in completely uncharted waters. We are moving out of the 10,000 years of climate stability of the Holocene into an area of very dangerous climate change. And we're also seeing tremendous loss of biodiversity, which has huge implications for our food systems, for the sustainability of the ocean chain, for the livability of the planet. And of course, the people who are most affected by this are poor people. This is from floods that happened recently in Durban in South Africa. And poor people obviously do not have the resources to be able to withstand. They can't pay for air conditioning. They can't, sort of do the extra work on their houses to withstand floods, etc. So they're by far the most vulnerable. And actually, the problem is being caused by the rich. And the rich, we all fall in that top 10%, the people on this call. The top 10% produce about 45% of greenhouse gas emissions. The top 1% produces 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So the problem is being caused by us. And we are the people who have benefited from the system, and we're the people that are causing the collapse, the climate breakdown, and the ecosystems breakdown. So the problem of climate and inequality is extremely interlinked. And at the same time, we're seeing that we're entering a period where the presumptions that growth would bring benefits to everybody is beginning to fail. This is from the recent report on the SDGs, and the reds are showing the SDGs, which are showing significant stagnation or regression. We're moving backwards in many areas. We're not moving forwards. And our model of exploitation of people and planet is way beyond its sell-by date. We need new approaches that take a different non-exploitative way of relating to other people and to the planet. And indigenous and decolonized ways have tremendous learnings for us in terms of different ways of knowing and being in this world. So what role does evaluation play in this? Is it going to support the status quo? Or is it asking fundamental questions of what we're trying to do and how? And there's a very nice quote, I think, from Bagele Chalisa and Nikki's paper editorial at the beginning of the special edition, saying there's a need for each evaluator to question the philosophical foundations of their beliefs, where they come from, and the ways these beliefs influence how they go about doing evaluation and how they position themselves in the context of the history and social theory of evaluation and indeed the world. And the challenge we're setting in this webinar is it's one thing thinking about individual evaluations, but what do we do about trying to institutionalize evaluation in government, and how do we bring more decolonized and more ecologically based approaches into these sort of evaluation systems, which are inherently have a machine-based routinized element because of being part of government, so that learning and deep reflection becomes part of the way government works. And just so that we enter this space in trying to integrate our head, our heart, and our body, I would like to ask you all to just close your eyes and just feel for the moment how your body is feeling in this moment. And by all means, if you want to stop your video, stop your video. I see mine was stopped anyway. And for us to change our way of operating in the world, we have to learn from the different indigenous cultures, whether Hindu, whether Xhosa, whether Lunape, to integrate our head, heart, and hand. Otherwise, we have no chance of healing society and the planet. And to do that, we have to go within. It is the internal change that drives the external change. So I invite you to feel in your body where you have tension. In your stomach, in your back, in your neck, and to breathe deeply and let that tension depart. And I invite you to feel your calves. Loosen the tension in your calves. And feel your thighs, the upper part of your legs, and loosen the tension. Feel around your stomach and loosen the tension around your stomach. And feel your back and loosen the tension in your back. And feel your chest and breathe deeply. Just let the tension go out with your breath. And relax your face. Let the tension go out of your face, out of your jaw. And relax your forehead. And I invite you to think of one of your ancestors. It might be your family, or it could be somebody like Suli Gariba, an ancestor for the African evaluation community. What would they advise you to do to deal with the polycrisis the world now faces? And slowly come out to think how we take forward this intent. And with that, I want to hand over to Candace, who's going to talk about the analytical framework that we've been using in this for this paper.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So in this paper, we were looking at different ways in which to frame our thinking around national evaluation systems, and institutionalism was what we chose as a lens to examine specifically government bureaucracies, because that's where we're finding the manifestation of national evaluation systems. So institutionalism, really what it says is that there are certain rules of behavior that guide institutions. These rules are informal, they can be formal as well. And colonial rules basically shaped many modern democracies in Africa and the global South. So, at the risk of being really reductionist in a very, very short space of time, I'd like to encourage you, if you're interested in more of this, there's a lot written about this in public administration, for example. So it's a lot more complex and a lot more deep. But some of the characteristics of institutionalism means that these systems are predictable. So you will usually see a typical elite, hierarchical, bureaucratic machinery. It will be very rules-based, based on accountability. There'll be little involvement of non-state actors and indigenous actors. So basically very, very immutable, non-changing type of iron cage of an institution. And that's the theory of old institutionalism. So old institutionalism basically says that these institutions are immutable. They are unchanging. We can't change them. There's no room for transformative change. There's no room for a decolonial approach if you want to strengthen or reshape the system. It's always going to just be based on the pattern of what exists before. The problem is that the theory of old institutionalism is limited. It really ignores that institutional development is dynamic, it's unpredictable. There is an interaction of many, many variables, things like identity, culture, self-interests of political actors, and even civil society, geopolitics, contextual issues. So new institutionalism is what we really use to reframe or rethink how we can use this theory for a more transformative purpose. So the theory of new institutionalism starts to open up the paradigm a little more, and it tells us that institution building is actually a lot more dynamic. We're not merely subjected to what came before. We don't have to be subject to the normative rules that dictate the form and function of the bureaucracy. Next slide, please, Ian. So how does this impact on and influence contemporary national evaluation systems? So in the 1960s, new public management approaches really drove public sector reforms. It was a wave that drove them globally, not just in the global south. Some of you will remember, Thatcherism and Reaganism, the sort of lean bureaucracy, less social spending, more rules-based, more behaving like the private sector. And this wave, went across public administrations. And what happened was there was a copycat behavior, what we call institutional isomorphism. Just a fancy phrase to say bureaucracies started copying a pattern that was acceptable to the global order. So things like audit units, audit functions, and so forth. And this assimilation really led to bureaucracies saying that, well, for us to be legitimate in the global order, we need to assimilate and comply with these patterns. This raises a very, very important question for us, especially when we're working in national evaluation systems. What is the risk? What is the potential for this kind of copycat behavior or isomorphism in building national evaluation systems? Are we just copying what came before or what we see to assimilate into the global order? So what we see is that African bureaucracies there's a contestation here. It's influenced by colonial models, but what we see is a hybridity. Yes, between colonial and post-colonial forms of bureaucracies in Africa, there was very little space to indigenize and build from indigenous and endogenous knowledge the kind of bureaucratic system. So what it did was it basically reappropriated existing traditions as it became independent. This tended to favor colonial elites. The norms and the rules and the behaviors were selected. There was selective process of selecting local African cultures, cultural aspects into the bureaucracy. And what we now see is a unique combination of characteristics that makes our African bureaucratic systems quite hybrid. And then lastly, what then is the transformative potential for us if we're looking at a different way of thinking about institutions? If we're talking about we don't want to be merely subject to what came before, if we're saying that we use the lens of new institutionalism, that there is a dynamism in how institutions behave, what other lenses or heuristics can we use to enable us to have more agency to say that some things can change? So what we looked at was Parsons and Winter's paper from the JMDE Special Edition. They talk about patterns of organization of machine-based and ecology-based systems. And we looked at how these may frame a decolonized approach to evaluation. Basically, from what I've been saying now, if you look at what Parsons and Winters is saying about machine-based systems, those are hierarchical, they close boundaries, they rules-based, focus on homogeneity, resilience, predictability, and so forth. So those are really leaning towards colonial, iron cage type of institutions. Ecological systems, on the other hand, provide a transformative perspective and lens. They talk about distributed controls, a nested web-like network, flexible, relatively open boundaries. Systems are grounded in principles of symbiosis, partnering, resilience through flexibility and diversity, cyclicity, interdependence, and expectations of unpredictability. So I want to encourage you to think about evaluation systems, the bureaucracies within which these live and which we live under, and think how different would these look if we had an ecological systems perspective. And then Asnain also brings forward a very useful, valuable framing of decolonizing our thinking around systems, moving away from characteristics such as either-or thinking, fear of open conflict, perfectionism, and worship of the written word, and also encourage us to think about, viewing conflict as healthy, for example, seeing progress as more than economic growth, but really manifesting rather in increasing humanity's well-being. So both of these authors and these papers we used as lenses to say, yes, if we buy into and believe that institutions can change, can we then think differently about them? Can we apply an ecological systems framing to them? Can we look at the characteristics of decolonized systems? and then look at what is needed, what is evaluation need to do in order to transform these systems moving forward. Ian, I think at this point, this is the summary of the framing. I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
So what we would now like to do is, before blasting you with any more information, is just allowing you in small random groups of 3 to engage. This is not about producing knowledge which we're going to build on. It's just for you to try and relate what came into your heart space when you were thinking about your ancestors, what comes in as you think about the framework that Candace has brought, and a chance for you all to say, what does decolonization of evaluation mean for you? We just like to ask you all just to make sure that you listen deeply to each other and you all have a chance to speak. And so you'll have 10 minutes, and then Viviana will now break into groups for you to have this short conversation with each other. Just while we're waiting for people to join, would you just put some of your reflections in the chat? Just what some points that came out for you, and I'll ask a few to voice them. So just in the chat, what came out for you? What struck you in your conversations? While we were just waiting for the others, Mark, do you want to just voice yours, and others will come, I think?
Sure. So we had 3 that we mentioned. One, obviously the contextual understanding, and we feel that obviously that it's important that you decolonize national evaluation systems, and it's essential to recognize the historical, cultural, and socioeconomic context of the country, specifically now referring to Africa and the global South, which is currently perhaps being evaluated. And we also then spoke about indigenous knowledge systems. Specifically, Janet spoke about this, but she can expand further. But my understanding is that many evaluation approaches are rooted in Western paradigms and may not adequately capture the diverse worldviews and knowledge systems of indigenous peoples. Therefore, decolonizing national evaluation systems probably involves integrating indigenous knowledge traditions and into the evaluation process. This can obviously enhance the relevance and validity of evaluations, especially in assessing issues like land rights, cultural preservations, as well as community well-being. Janet, if I left anything out there, you
Thanks.
could add. That was my understanding.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. So we will capture this, but it's not, we're not trying to accumulate knowledge here. It was more about giving you an opportunity to reflect yourselves. And so what I think we'll move on to now is moving on with talking a little bit more about some of the thinking, the approach that we've been exploring in trying to develop this paper. And so we're going to hand over to Thokozile.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Ian, for the opportunity. Colleagues, you've heard about different papers that were used to ground our work. So the example that I will be providing is based on Parsons and Winter's paper. So we've looked at, as you heard, that they talk about machine-based versus ecological-based systems. So I'll be presenting then about South Africa's national evaluation system. We've been having a national evaluation system since 2011, and it's guided by the National Evaluation Policy Framework. With the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation being the custodian of the national evaluation system at national level, and offices of the Premier in provinces also leading the provincial evaluation system. So Parsons talks about purpose, structure, and processes, and in terms of purpose, I think they indicate that a more ecological national evaluation system's purpose is to evolve and regenerate life, even in complex situation. And in terms of structure, it must have distributed network structure with flexible boundaries, and processes are grounded in principles rather than rules, and it's resilient and also independent. You can go to the next slide. South Africa's national evaluation system, you'll see here, colleagues, we use various colors, and it seems in terms of the purpose when we started the national evaluation system was to improve effectiveness and impact of government by strengthening interventions to improve the lives of the citizens. And the orange or the amber color means that the system is in between ecological and machine-based. And you see the other 2 pointers are in the green, which means we more ecological in terms of the purpose, because the system was established in an emergent way to promote learning and also to move away from punitive approach. And we have also recently approved and launched 2 new guidelines on gender equity and also climate and ecosystems health. And this then makes us to lean more towards ecological system. In terms of structure, colleagues, you'll see that I think here we are more machine-based, because as I indicated, we have national, provincial, and also some M&E units in departments, as well as some of the municipalities. And in terms of coalition, we have formed a number of coalitions with different stakeholders to support the national evaluation system, such as the South African Monitoring and Evaluation Association, Clear AA, Twendembele, so that then makes us to be more ecological. And we also have regulatory structures for stability and consistency. And I think this is comprised by the National Evaluation Advisory Committee, and also feedback structures such as reporting on evaluations at government clusters, as well as cabinet. And we are also weak on participation of civil society. So in terms of processes, so for one to be ecological, you then have to be grounded in principles, and rather than to have rules, and also be resilient and rather than homogeneity. So I think South Africa's national evaluation system, as you can see, everything is almost machine-based here, because as I indicated, we have a policy framework which guides the national evaluation system and also evaluation plans at different levels, national and also provincials. We also have a number of guidelines that guide evaluation in the public service, and this fosters homogeneity, and also quality is paramount, and these qualities are assured through setting up steering committee, peer reviewers, and also quality assessment processes after evaluations are completed. And we also have a system set up to monitor the implementation of recommendations through improvement plans. So, colleagues, I think overall, based on this, we are leaning towards both ecological and also machine-based. Ian, I think this was the last one on my side.
Thank you. And I think the thing we have to recognize is that government systems will generally be machine-based. And the question is, because they need predictability, people need to know what to expect when you go in. You can't just have everything happening randomly in a sense. So, but the question is, how much are we bringing more flexibility, more learning, more listening into it, so that it is more able to respond to the challenges of the time, etc. So it's not an either or. It's a case of the balance. And then I'm going to hand over to Eduard, bringing in Hasnain's sort of thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. So basically, using the Hasnain frame of thinking, what we are trying to analyze here is to what extent the bureaucracy, the system, is decolonized. And so for that, we are looking at some criteria. For example, to what extent it's a both and thinking approach rather than either approach, whether the system is open to new trends, to new themes that are not predefined by the donors, for instance, in order to embrace the themes and standards that are also within the indigenous communities. At the same time, to what extent, as Candice explained earlier, the system is open to conflict and seeing conflict as healthy in order to make progress and to bring transformation. So those criteria have been applied to the case of Benin to see to what extent the system is decolonized, and I'll go to some of those criteria in the next slides. Thank you, Jan. So in terms of the both and thinking rather than either or approach, what we found that is this, even though the system is designed to improve living condition and for all people, the system is designed with the objective to be inclusive. We have seen little effort to move beyond donor pre-established themes and trends. Findings are used sometimes for minor change. For instance, based on the evaluation finding, they can design new plan or new document, but this is not an approach for learning and for improvement of what has been done. When I've been discussing with some of the stakeholders of the system, they were saying that basically the system is more policy-based evidence than evidence-based policy. So basically, you define your policy and you use evidence to make sense of that policy instead of using the evidence to develop new policies. So the system is not open up enough for transformation, for trying to integrate knowledge and indigenous people into thinking about what should be the policy that needs to be implemented. At the same time, when in regard to conflicts, conflict is seen as part of the evaluation policy design, in that there is a steering committee, technical committees that are always put in place to monitor the evaluation process. But the question is still about the inclusiveness of that committee. So, of course, there are some civil society representative within that committee, but the committee are not open enough to take into account local and indigenous view into the evaluation process design, because the work is done in French, and French as a language is not always available is not always accessible to a lot of people. So that's still a barrier for inclusion in that process. And next slide, please. Using the criteria is the process focus on perfectionism or good enough approach toward evaluation. And what we found is that the evaluation, there is some sort of desire to move toward technically perfect evaluation, trying to use randomized control trials, which is seen as the best evaluation that you can have. So even though there are technical committees that are put in place, those are trying to make sure that the evaluation are very perfect in that sense, that they have used the best methodology that are available without thinking of how they can integrate, they can be participatory enough and make just a good evaluation, an objective evaluation that can help make sound decisions for the implementation of their policies. And the other criteria that is on the Hasnen framework is to what extent we find a balance between the qualitative and quantitative approach. To what extent mixed method approaches are implemented in conducting those evaluations. And what we found in the case of Benin is that there have been a meta evaluation that has been conducted, or for the evaluations that have been implemented over the last 10 years. And what we found is that evaluation methods are predominantly qualitative. And there is some effort to move toward formative evaluations. But then the problem still relies on to what extent those qualitative evaluation are participatory enough to bring in the view of the indigenous people. And this is still like a challenge for the process, even though qualitative approach is implemented and mixed method evaluation are sometimes used. In terms of the communication, because if you like to be participatory to make sure that the evaluation process from the planning to the validation of the evaluation report and the use of the evaluation report, we have the voice of the indigenous people. That means that we should, for instance, translate the evaluation report into local language because there are still a lot of people who cannot understand French, which is the official language. But there is one of the problem that you've seen is that there is still evaluation are written in French with very lengthy reports with no translation in local language, which precludes the process from integrating the voice of local people to the process. And last thing is the go slow to go faster, which means that the process timely enough to take into account the voice of indigenous people for decision making. And what we've seen is that in Benin, there have been some efforts lately to move towards a rapid evaluation, because with the crisis that we've faced, it was clear that there is a need for quick decision making, fast decision making, and to respond that need, the system has started implementing rapid evaluation, which is a response to that need for decision making, which is something that we consider as being a flexibility of the system towards a more context-sensitive evaluation. But yet, the problem remains that all those changes are not very sustainable, because they depend a lot on the bureaucracy and on the individual who have power within the bureaucracy. And how do we make sure that we bring in enough understanding of what decolonization of evaluation mean, so that those changes can be really sustained and embraced by all the stakeholders of of the bureaucracy, and that's quite a challenge for the system. I think, Jan, this will end my slide. Thank you.
Over to Candice.
Colleagues, as we heard now, an excellent analytical or analysis of those two case studies against those framings of, Hasnain and Beverly, Parsons and Winters. And some of the emerging findings that we have, I think on the next slide is, and I think you would have identified this already, the national evaluation systems are currently of a hybrid nature. So they have some kind of characteristics of colonial machine-based systems and post-colonial systems. So the structures, norms, and the standards, they operate sort of, in contestation all the time, but they definitely do lean in a large way towards machine-based modalities. And I think we can see that, for example, through the weak participation of local communities and indigenous communities in the system itself. There are some efforts, though, and very deliberate efforts by some countries to establish systems that are more based on sort of indigenous needs and context. So things like peer learning coming through in Twendembele, which is an organizational institution that allows for peer learning amongst African governments. And this particular institution allows room for agility, learning, and movement. And those do lean towards more ecological models of systems building. There is an awareness of and some deliberate action taking place to be transformative. So I would, for example, foreground the DPME system of impact or guidelines for impact evaluation, for example, being very clear about they not exhorting single approaches or methods, such as randomized control trials in a hierarchy of importance. So that again leans more to ecological systems. I think the weaknesses, next slide please, Ian, is what I've already mentioned, is the participation of citizens in evaluations and in the system that produces the evaluations themselves. So you're not really going to see citizens participating in evaluation steering committees, for example. So this is an area, a weakness that, leans towards machine-based systems. So we should start thinking, how can we use some of these characteristics of ecological models of decolonized systems to change some of the ways in which the system shows up? Can we perhaps give some room, some space to citizens to be involved in some of these systems? So we can't really define contemporary national evaluation systems in a binary sort of categorization. They're not either decolonized or colonized. The system really drifts between being rule-based, machine-based, and then more open and more social ecological, which I think is an opportunity for us as evaluators working in the space, whether as evaluators helping to produce evidence or supporting with capacity development or involved in technical support and advisory services to governments. How do we start to bring in and have some kind of agency to move some of these systems or parts of the bureaucratic machinery, if I can put it that way, towards more open and ecological systems thinking? So the balancing of these contesting institution shaping paradigms could be one of the most important concerns for national evaluation systems today. Thank you, Ian. Thanks so much, Ian. So Beverly, we are absolutely privileged to have you in our space here, and you're the best person to critique us. Did we read your paper correctly? And the way we've applied it to these case studies, and if you can share with us maybe some of your reflections on it. Did you, is there anything that stands out? Is there anything that we missed? So over to you, Beverly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Candice. Well, it's a real privilege to be here with you all. And I've just been fascinated by listening to you and to looking at the ways in which you've applied these ideas of machine-based versus ecological-based systems. I want to step back from, and I think several people have mentioned it, is that these systems are nested inside of the larger hierarchical machine-based systems, and that's been mentioned here several times. And so I think that one of the things that stands out for me is just how far can we get by working within that larger context, and that is the reality of what we're dealing with. So so I'm on one hand saying it's so great to see the way that you're intentionally looking at the difference in structure, the difference in purpose, the difference in processes. And so I see a lot of really positives happening within that context. I want to make two comments about it. One is that I personally have to keep coming back to looking at what is the purpose of the big machine-based system, and you know, these are lenses to look at things. They're not like you know, I mean, they're pretty brief descriptions of what these systems look like. But when you think about the machine-based system that we're all living within these days, it really is to produce something by extraction of the energy and the matter of nature for consumption and our use. So there's all of nature has a component of that, and we need to extract and consume on one hand. But what's happened is that has become so dominant that it's taking over in the bigger sense, not looking now just at the evaluation system itself, but we're living in that situation where that is the dominant mentality that's going on. And the purpose of the ecological system is to evolve and regenerate life in this complex situation. So as Ian said at the beginning, we have this climate situation. The ecological life of the planet is rebelling against the way this process has been going on of such extraction. So so for me, when I think about this, I keep coming back to what is my purpose in working within whatever system I'm in. And I love the fact that Ian began with this kind of reflection, because when I can get overwhelmed by the challenge, and I think we all can, but I think what we can do is on a daily basis be bringing ourselves back to a reflective moment when we start our work to see, today, when I do my work, am I going to be somehow focused on extraction and consumption and what's happening there? Or can I really bring into this the regeneration of life? How can I bring in these ways of thinking that you have articulated that are of that ecological nature that allows me to be a part of regenerating and evolving life in this very complex situation? So I think we have to work at those multiple levels of applying it. And I just would say in regard to HERS framework, that again is, I think, is another way to get at even the more detailed work that we're doing and look at some concrete things. Finally, I'd just like to acknowledge that Katie Winters, who is my partner in writing this paper, is on our call today, and I appreciate so much having had the opportunity to work with you and so much. I mean, I hope that you'll look at some of the things that are in the paper. I'm also going to put in, because there's so many good examples, not just in our paper, but in that whole journal article of very concrete ways to decolonize and indigenize things. And I'm also going to put in the chat a couple of other ways of thinking that weren't in the paper, but you might be interested in pursuing. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bev. We would love to receive that from you. And just to acknowledge Katie Winters, thank you so much for being here as well. Apologies that I didn't acknowledge you earlier, but thank you so much for contributing to our thinking, obviously, in this paper. So there are so many things we'd love to have a conversation about, Beverly, but we'd actually like participants to start talking and sharing about their thoughts around this. So we will pick up the conversation, obviously, again. Ian, let me hand back over to you to talk about the group work. Thank you so much.
We really would like to not shortchange you on having a chance to talk to each other. So I think we're going to go 10 minutes over, but I'd really like to make sure you've got 12 minutes in groups. So what we'd like you to do is just agree somebody to facilitate, because these are bigger groups. They're going to be 7 people, and we're going to and Viviana will share a link to Google Docs, because we'd like to capture your thinking here. And what you'll see, there's one slide. Each Google slide has a slide that says group 1 or group 2, and there's group 1 slide. What has really struck you that would affect your work? And then a second slide, group 1, how can we take decolonization of evaluation systems forward? So you must choose the group that's, the group that you're in, group 1, group 2, group 3, whatever. So the link is in the chat now. So that's the link to the Google Slides. So if you would like to discuss in Spanish, then please stay in the main room. The main room will stay in Spanish. But if you're Spanish speaking but reasonably comfortable speaking in English, then do join the other groups. It's up to you. So we're going to break into groups now, groups of 7, and you're going to have 12 minutes, and we'll basically at 30 minutes past the hour, that the group will be finished. So enjoy your conversation. And it's basically going to be asking these things. What has really struck you that would affect your work? And how can we take decolonization of evaluation systems, not individual evaluation systems forward? Enjoy your discussion. A bit more about that, the either or?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. Really pleased to be here with you. Yeah, so I was just noticing as people were sharing their reflections earlier, a tendency that I have as well, which is to just very easily sort of slip into this binary, right? The either or. Is it machine-based or is it ecology-based? Is it colonized? Is it decolonized? And it's, I think, a natural and in some ways Western dominant way of sort of wanting to put things into conversation with each other, and as we do that, to think of them as diametrically opposed. And so I was sharing in our group that the yin-yang image that we worked with in the paper has been helpful to me to kind of come back to this. It's almost like a sensitizing concept, right? Like, to be thinking about the interplay of these aspects and that they'll always be there. And, kind of what is the next right thing with intervention or program or initiative or evaluation practice, that whatever the next right thing might be to bring things into a balance that's going to be more supportive of life and the continuing evolution of life and thriving for people and planet. And to just notice the ways that, we can tend to put things into that binary and oppositional as opposed to a harmonization.
Indeed, yes. Jank, do you want to just say something about what you wrote?
Yes, thank you. What I think is to decolonize the evaluation, first we have to reverse the accountability of evaluators. Now evaluators are accountable towards upwards rather than downwards. So that has to reverse, what I think. We discussed it as well. Thank you.
And I just noticed in group 2, just looking at your Google Slides, do you want to say something about the point you made about making a difference as a whole person? It's not in the chat, but it's in your Google slide.
Well, it is a conviction which I have, in the sense that the things that we are attending to relate to transforming life. And our motivation towards them, as seen in the perspective of work, might not be fair enough if it's not linked to the life and the changes that we want to transform. And I tend to see that in many instances, such processes or initiatives are followed because we are in them for the sake of the work and what we carry with at the end of the day, and forgetting the implications of these initiatives to our lives and the lives of the people that we possibly stand in different roles to support. So my feeling was that the statement to me was missing out on something if we're only looking at it at the space of work and not lives that we lead and the changes that we would wish to be created.
Very nice. Great. Okay. Well, I think we've got the Google Slides. If you want to add more into those Google Slides, you're welcome to do so. And obviously, you can also see what other people have written. So I'm not going to ask for more feedback on the Google Slides. I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the main PowerPoint. We're really hopeful that this discussion, this conversation doesn't end today, and that many of you would like to take this conversation forward. And if you would like to take the conversation forward, can you put your name and email in the chat? And if there's something in particular that you're interested in, and this particular conversation, I mean, we're interested in decolonizing evaluation generally, but there's also a particular group of us who work with national evaluation systems who are really interested in what we do about decolonizing the systems, who by their nature have a significant machine-based component. And so we'd really like to hear which other people would like to explore. So if you would like to continue the conversation, put your name and email in the chat and what you're interested in, which could be around NESs, or it could be otherwise in evaluation, so that we then link you up and you can see what, and what, where you can go to in that conversation. So please, in the chat, if there's something that you would particularly, that you would like to follow up. We will use the inputs to revise the paper, and we will share the paper with you when it's finalized. And if you have any further thoughts, do send them either to me or to Candace. On things that struck you, and we may well develop some sort of community of practice from the Academy around this. So again, that's where your names and emails would be particularly relevant, and then we can know who's interested in what. We put the link to the JMDE special edition here. Maybe Viviana, you could put that link in the chat as well. And we encourage you to go and read the papers. We particularly focused on two here, well, three really, with the editorial paper as well. But it's a really, really rich source. And just a reminder that there are the sessions at the European Evaluation Society, the training by Michael Quinn-Patton and Veronica on principles. And on 15th of November, which is on 16th, and the 15th of November, the conversation that Nikki and I will be having, particularly bringing up the issues around Indigenous rather than so much on decolonization. And if you have any other ideas, do please follow up with Viviana at that email. We thank you for joining us, and thanks to Devel for the interpretation. And what I'd just like to invite you to do is also, if you'd just like to close your eyes for a minute and reflect how you're feeling now in this moment, just for 25, 30 seconds. And then I'm going to just put in the chat 1 or 2 words about how you're feeling in this moment. One thing we didn't say actually was that this paper that we're writing is in a special edition of the African Evaluation Journal. And I'm very happy it's in, we're honoring the African Evaluation Journal. And it's a special edition to honor Sully Gariba, who was a real free thinker and really initiator of a lot of the ideas of what we call Made in Africa evaluation, and who passed, I think, early this year. A very impressive man. Okay, so do feel free to carry on putting some words in the chat and your contacts if you would like to carry this forward. Thank you very much for joining us on this conversation. We hope you will join us more. Janet is saying, and I think it's a very good idea, could we all just put our videos on so that we can take a photo and honor this moment? Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And I mean, this is very much, we feel it's not the end of a conversation, it's the beginning of a conversation. And so far as I know, we've never had this conversation around national evaluation systems. And I do quite a lot of work supporting the Global Evaluation Initiative around this. And one of the things is it's saying, you know, with the countries we're working with, saying, don't copy systems. What's relevant to your country, to the crises that we are facing, that in this moment in time, don't copy. So let's Viviana, you taking one, or Janet, you taking one? Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Just invite you to, in your own language, say goodbye, and we look forward to joining you in this conversation going forward. And please do, you know, we'll inform all of you about the dates of the next events as they come up. So bye everybody. Hasta la vista.